let's take a look at another emotion. Let's look at the development of negative emotions. With newborns, as I mentioned previously, we pretty much have generalized distress. So if they are unhappy about something, it really is as a result of the environment. They're not really feeling unhappiness or anger or sadness as we think of it as adults. They're feeling generalized distress. They may be hungry. They may have a wet diaper. There may be some other negative influence. It may be too loud. So they're really just telling us there's something wrong. By about 2 months of age, now we have infants that are more likely to show anger and sadness. And as they develop this over time, you actually find that not only are we better able to tell the difference between them, but children are more specific in terms of the types of emotion that they express. By 6 to 7 months of age, now you actually see fear. Two areas of development that are really, really critical and that are also very important for you to understand when it comes to this development of fear is called stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety is basically a fear of strangers, and this tends to peak at between 8 and 10 months of age. So it starts before this, it does continue after this, but at 8 to 10 months of age, it peaks. So prior to this, let's say you had your cute little 6-month-old and they were just happy with everybody. They would smile, they're engaging with everyone, and then all of a sudden, when you try to have them interact with others, now they are being fearful of anyone that they don't know. That's actually very, very normal. And some will argue that it actually has a evolutionary component to it, where prior to this, what's happening is they are really forming attachments with those who are around them, with their caregivers, because stranger anxiety and the formation of these attachments, as we'll talk about later in the semester, tend to coincide with each other. There's also separation anxiety. Separation anxiety tends to start at about 6 to 8 months of age. Now, let me mention that that is 6 to 8 months of age in Western cultures. When it starts does depend on the culture that the child is in. In Western cultures, we are more likely to separate ourselves from our infants at a much younger age than other cultures, such as Asian cultures, for example. So if you look at the way that Japanese, for example, are with their infants, you'll find that Japanese mothers tend to spend a lot more time with their infants and they tend to maintain much closer physical contact with them than we tend to in Western culture. Now, with separation anxiety, of course, this is exactly what it says. It's the discomfort at being separated from your caregivers, particularly your primary caregiver. It tends to peak around 14 to 18 months of age. Now, this is really, really interesting, particularly when I'm talking about parents that have their children in a daycare or a preschool, where prior to this, let's say they're having a great time, they're dropping them off and they're actually doing okay. Sometimes they may cry a little bit. And then all of a sudden, when they reach 14, 15 months of age, maybe a little bit older, now it becomes a big issue. Now they don't want to stay with their daycare provider. They cry a lot more. You see a dramatic difference in their behavior. One of the things to keep in mind is that it actually is pretty normal because this is when separation anxiety tends to peak. Now, this is not to say that it should just be ignored. What this says is that this is normal, and yes, there may be some additional steps that may help in terms of making the infant feel more secure, but it is not what some parents initially think, which is, well, there must suddenly be a problem with the daycare provider or my child would not be reacting like this. That generally really is not the case.